Hey friends, this is Christopher Davis-Shannon, and the first day you bought your ukulele, you probably learned the G major chord and haven't really thought about it much since. But this wonderful chord shape actually has a whole host of usages up and down the fingerboard. In this video, I'm going to show you 7 different ways to apply this relationship of notes. One thing that I always stress to my students is to be very cognizant and recognize the similarities between chords, be it common tones or similar intervallic relationships, or how far apart each of the notes are. In addition to that, we're going to break down how this chord is actually built, because when we understand the notes that are contained in there, it gives us a lot more knowledge and a lot more ability to be able to do whatever we'd like with it. So don't forget to like and subscribe and all those things that YouTube loves. Let's get started. So the first thing we need to do is truly break down what a G major chord is. I know that for a lot of us, we think of it as just this shape on the fingerboard. But we need to look into what notes are really contained in here and how they are arranged so that we can mold this into different sounds. So our typical G major chord that we have, for our open G string, right? And a G major chord is constructed with G, B, and D. That's what we call a triad voicing, a 3-note voicing for a chord. And in this case, we're in what's called second inversion, or G is not our lowest note, unless you're playing low G, in which case it very much is. But I'm on high G, so we'll be speaking in those terms today. We're starting out, actually our lowest note is a D on the 2nd fret of our C string. The G is doubled on the E string, the 3rd fret, as well as our outer string. And then the B, the 3rd of the chord, is on the 2nd fret of our A string. And that gives us a second inversion G major chord. Now, one thing that you might already be aware of is that since we're doubling this note on the outside, especially on high G, we don't really need both of those. So if you are averse to bar chords, this is actually a great 3-note voicing that you can use. These 3 notes on our C, E, and A strings contain all of the notes we need to have a G major chord. We can move this itself to any fret on the instrument and play a different chord. All we have to do is figure out where the root of the chord is, or the name of the chord, and that's on the 3rd fret of our E string. So if we figure out whatever note is on our E string and move this voicing accordingly, we'll have a different chord. So if we wanted to play an A flat chord, which is not one that we generally like very much on this instrument, all we have to do is slide this up 1 fret. And what I like to do is I take my hand and let my first finger just rest ever so lightly on the G string so that it's muted when I strum. I have a nice A flat chord. A, B flat, B, all the way up. No bars necessary, just being a little bit lazy with our technique. So that in and of itself gives you really 12 different chords that you can play with just this shape going up and down the neck. But what if we add the G string back into the equation? So what we're going to do is use the open G string to add color. So we already know that we have a major triad on any fret that we're on. It's just a matter of how this open G string interacts with that. So let's go through 6 additional voicings that utilize this open G string and how we can apply them to this instrument. So the most basic thing we can do is any chord that contains a G, any just regular old triad, we can just play with it open, and that would be our G right here. And then we also have our C major chord up on the 7th fret. We have an open G, our C major chord is C, E, and G. So we get that sound. And then the final one is actually up on the 10th fret. We have an E flat chord. This nice high voicing in second inversion. We have E flat, G, and B flat. So those 3 voicings get you pretty far. But what if we make these 4-note chords and have some fun? So we already said that if we put this up on the 3rd fret, we have an A flat chord. What happens if we add a G to an A flat chord? That's a beautiful floating sound. This is an A flat major 7th, which you might have played like this before. These are the same exact notes. and a much easier to play version. Likewise, if we slide this up one more fret to the 4th fret, we know that this is an A chord in the triad. And if we add that G to it, we have an A 7th chord. It's really the same as a voicing like this, just moved right on up. If we slide this up one more fret, this is one of my personal favorite usages for this chord shape. This is a G minor 7th or a B flat 6th, depending on how we use it in context. And that's the joy of 4-note chords, is a lot of times we can change the tonality of them by how we approach them. Watch this. So if I want this to be a B flat, I'd play an F 7th before it, because that's our dominant chord in the key of B flat. Nice happy major chord. But what if I wanted this to be a G minor 7th? I'd use a D 7th chord to approach this, and it would sound like this. Same exact chord, totally different tonality by the approach. Now after that, we can go up to the C. We already talked about that. And then we have finally one of my favorite voicings up here. If we go up to the 9th fret, we have a nice D major chord. And we know that, well, a G is not really contained in a D major chord, but we can use it as what's called an extension, or add it on top of the chord. And if we add the G to this, it's a beautiful open sound. And this is the 4th we're adding, but since it's going on top, we won't call it a 4th, we'll call it an 11th. So this will be a D major 11th chord, which has a very beautiful sound to it. So there it is. Those are just 7 variations that you can use on this shape across the fingerboard. Play around and see what else you can find. And every other chord that you play down low on the instrument generally has some functionality up higher. Stop thinking about chords as just, this is a G, this is a C. Think about how they're constructed and how we can put them to good use. I'll see y'all next week.